we've now got to start the panel because we haven't got a lot of time. The panel is entitled The Perils of Prediction. We've all been primed on what prediction is and some of its strong points and how people go wrong with prediction. So I'd just like to start with each person sort of discussing what they think are the perils of prediction and what are the benefits. So, Ben, would you like to start?
No.
Or would you do it anyway?
I'd like someone else to start.
No, but I just arrived, so you start.
I'll start.
Okay.
So I kind of, people are always asking, like, well, when's AI going to happen? And I pretty much try and avoid saying because, AI has been 10 or 50 years away for the last 50 years. And so I know it's a sort of a bad game. And I think one of the best insights into prediction was something I heard Paul Sappho say a little while ago, which is people tend to overestimate what's going to happen in the short term, because especially as technologists, we can kind of see, oh yeah, all you have to do is this, this, and this, and it'll happen, it's going to happen tomorrow. And it always takes way longer than you think it will. There's all these unforeseen things, and political wheels turn slowly, companies take a long time, stupid stuff that, you're thinking, oh, that's trivial, turn out not to be so trivial. And yet, on the longer time scale, we tend to underestimate what's going to happen. I mean, the internet grew so much faster than I was expecting. Things like Wikipedia, it's like, 5 years after it's there, wham, it grows up. And that's because exponential curves are hard for us to handle. We kind of think of things linearly. And so I think we underestimate on the short term, overestimate on the long term. When it comes to AI, are we in the short term, long term? I don't know. But I think we're probably both underestimating and overestimating in the predictions we're making here.
Okay, well, I am extremely skeptical of all predictions of the future, except those that are based on data and mathematical formulas and involve physics. I think that people always ask me what's the next big breakthrough, and I always give them the same answer, which is that if I knew, I'd be doing it. And I think that if I look, I've been on many, happily none of you are labeled as futurists, so I can say this. I've been on many panels with futurists, and I find them not only tedious, but wrong all the time. We tend to miss the most exciting developments when we predict the future. That's because the universe is interesting. And if it weren't, if we didn't need the external empirical reality to guide us, then physicists would just be able to work by sitting in rooms without windows, and that's not the way science works. So the most exciting things are the surprises that the universe provides us, and that seems to me that's true in a social sense as well as a physical sense. And therefore, the most exciting things are the ones we can't anticipate now. As I say, if we could, we'd be doing it. All of the gentleman next to me would be doing it and making lots of money doing it, I assume. I think, and the best example I can think of is science fiction, which has missed the internet, as far as I can tell, in most of the major stories about what the world was like in the year 2001, say. And so that's a great example of the fact that you should take all predictions of the future, especially those that involve complex systems, complex social systems, with not just a grain of salt, but a bucket of salt.
So, fortunately, these guys are already made the points that predicting the future of complex systems is difficult, and people aren't very good at it. So now I get to say something else instead. And I mean, I agree with those points. They're hard to argue with. But one thing that interests me is the nature of self-fulfilling prophecies. And when you are not only predicting a complex system, but are part of that same complex system and have some power to influence that complex system, then your predictions are not just predictions anymore. They can actually, to some extent, guide what happens. And I think that's some of what Ray Kurzweil is doing when saying the singularity is coming in 2045. It's not just that he's saying this is going to come as a matter of mathematical certainty. by putting that out there and projecting it into the public mind, he is increasing the odds that it may come about that way by getting people to work toward it and take it seriously. So I gave a talk in 2007 at the Transvision conference, a transhumanist conference called, or maybe it was 06, I can't even remember now. But it was 2006, and it was called 10 years to a positive singularity if we really, really try. And that was not a prediction exactly of what was going to happen, because the we was the human race, and I didn't think the human race was going to really, really try to do that. We're occupied with many, many other pursuits. It was more a statement that if large segments of humanity pushed hard enough in that direction, as hard as, say, the U.S. physics community pushed toward the Manhattan Project during the period around World War II, a lot of amazing things could be done. And so I think there's an interesting balance to be struck between rational prediction of what your odds of success are and the very real power of positive thinking to help you be more successful. And if you look at athletes, as I've read a number of places, I mean, good athletes tend to be rational about their chances of success much of the time. But then when they're about to go into a game, many of them will psych themselves up like, yes, I'm going to win. I know I'm going to win. I'm invincible, all right? And that helps. Thinking you're invincible helps you win. On the other hand, if you thought you're invincible all the time, you would never practice because you would know you're invincible, so you would lose, right? So there's an interesting balance between being able to rationally extrapolate and what the human motivational system needs in order to push itself forwards. And then predictions like Kurzweil's projecting the singularity by 2045 seem almost like a mix of those two things, of rational extrapolation by the curve plotting and of him going out there and trying to sell the idea and actually drive us toward it. Then what he would say is that, yes, he is going out there and trying to sell it, and the fact that he's doing that is automatically factored into his curve plotting. Right? So there's an interesting interface there, which I'm still thinking through.
Partly because of that effect, I really don't like the word singularity. It presupposes a certain way, a certain image of how we go through these things. I personally would much prefer a slow transition in which we carefully think things through. So I don't have a sexy name like the singularity.
No, Max Moore has a good name for this. The surge.
It's still a little too fast.
It's pretty sexy.
I like the slow, easy growth toward a beautiful human future.
That's
boring. Not going to catch on, I don't think.
Wow. You think it's a beautiful human future? That's really amazing.
Just sort of along these same lines, there's a great quote, which is, the best way to predict the future is to create it.
Any questions from the audience?
Yeah.
Birthday boy?
How important do you think it is to have as accurate as possible view of the future, incorporating many, many different people's views? And do you think that that's the better data that we can get on that, even despite all of its uncertainty, is a good thing, or do you think it's a harmful thing to have people's views on?
Well, there are a few different views about that. I mean, I'm going to talk later on today about the future of the universe, not just 45 years from now, but 45 trillion years from now. But I think it doesn't hurt. It doesn't make. If you're doing interesting things, you don't really. The present is what matters, and you can extrapolate and try and plan for the future. But really, what's available now and what's interesting now is what's important. If you're going to be successful in many areas of intellectual activity, focusing on the long-term future won't get you there, as really you pointed out. On the other hand, there is the famous statement that fortune favors the prepared mind. And therefore, looking at the possibilities of the future and thinking of them as possibilities when one is acting and and even building things can be a useful thing as long as you recognize their possibilities. So I think, but when you're really doing things, real things, and not just pompously talking as I am at the moment, then you're thinking about the present. It seems to me, not the future.
It seems as though there's been some very interesting breakthroughs in technology in our lifetime. I mean, we've just recently, the internet has come about. We've made very strong inroads to biology. We now understand the genome, and hopefully within 20 years we're going to be able to do something interesting with that.
We don't understand the genome. We may have sequenced it, but we're far from understanding anything about it, actually. Much about it.
Well, all right.
I mean, that's well, you probably make money on that. Yeah. Okay.
So, but the thing is, what do you think the next big breakthroughs will be in the next 50 to 100 years in the short term, according to Lawrence?
Again, I told you I don't know what they'll be because I think we'll miss the biggest ones. But I do happen to think I would never call it a singularity, but I would be surprised if sometime this century computational systems did not become self-aware, which will change. This will be a major game changer because they'll be self-programmable and can improve their own hardware and software. And I think that's quite plausible, and I think it will affect the future of humanity because such systems will be able to evolve much easier than biological systems, and there'll have to be some incorporation. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. I think that would be I wouldn't be surprised if that happened amidst what I think will be a miserable future of war and shortages and lack of energy and global warming and lots of miserable things that are going to happen between now and then.
Do you think AIs will be able to help improve that future if designed correctly?
I doubt it. I think the future is going to be controlled by people who don't think much about the future. Namely politicians who really think about very short-term issues and cannot act on a global sense. I think these issues, the challenges facing humanity are largely global, and they're going to work out. They're just going to work out by the accidents of humanity, and we may struggle towards and accidentally move towards progress, but it won't be. I don't see a planned future in that way. I think it'll be competition between nations that could at times will be miserable and violent, and because those are the people who control things. If you just look at climate change, look at my country right now, it's clear that no actions were going to happen. So we just have to learn to live with it, and and live with the implications of it, and then that will produce some changes. And I don't know what the changes are. I spent a lot of time with a friend of mine who I'll talk a little bit about, named Freeman Dyson, who does like to think about a lot of things, including the future. And he's argued that that even if human-induced climate change is real, that it's not clear that it's bad. And so now Freeman has been wrong about a tremendous number of things, but he's a very smart guy anyway, and so he might be right. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm a good deal less pessimistic. I mean, I agree that human-level artificial general intelligence is going to be one of the big breakthroughs to happen in the next century. I think some kind of radical human life extension will come, and some form of nanotech and quantum computing will come about. I agree. As he said, the biggest breakthroughs may be yet other things besides these. Even if these do come about, there may be yet new kinds of technologies that we can't envision. I don't foresee big wars and great misery and shortages and so forth. I don't think that's implausible, but I don't think it's extremely likely. I mean, my own big picture view is sort of like we evolved for a Paleolithic situation of like being cavemen and running around in the savannah, and we are now thrust by our own evolution into civilization, which is very uncomfortable for us physically and psychologically. We're not made for it, as Freud pointed out eloquently in Civilization and its Discontents, and others have observed. And I think in the next century, this awkward period will be ended by us basically co-adapting our society and situation and our minds to each other. Like, now we're stuck with brains and bodies that are meant for a Paleolithic setting in an advanced civilization. But once we can engineer our brains, and we've created AI systems and nanofactories and other as yet unforeseen technologies, this disconnect will be gone. And I think things will be much more harmonious rather than more ridden with strife and violence.
Do you think that that's possible? But when the entities that will enter that future won't be humans. There'll be something. I mean, we'll redefine what we mean by human, maybe. But
we do that. We've done that already.
Well, yeah, but we're closer to the changes between us and Paleolithic humans are minor compared to the ones that I think you're talking about, and I think that that's not implausible. But I mean, namely that technology, computational technology, will change what intelligence, what the dominant intelligence on the planet is, and that dominant intelligence will proceed to dominate, but it won't be necessarily people with bags of water.
Probably not. It may continuously evolve from us, so that at each moment it feels the same as it was a week before and after.
Well, that's how evolution works, yeah.
So I agree with these guys that nanotechnology, I think, is going to probably be the dominant technology in the longer term. The ability to manufacture things atom by atom precisely. I think that's going to solve many of the ecological problems that we're facing today. I think new forms of organization of humanity is starting to show up already on the internet. I mean, it's dramatic what's going on. I think that current political structures are going to change dramatically. It may be that organizations on the web and interconnections in that sort of start doing things much more rapidly than the current political systems can. That may dramatically reorganize the world. And I'm hopeful. I think it's going to be cooperative rather than competitive.
Well, the internet, will make huge changes, and as its future, I think you're right. The social, the changes that happen because of that may be beyond the control of political groups. I think that's right. The other thing I should say, I think that that's totally maybe an aside, maybe not, is the other big thing I think is we'll discover life elsewhere in the universe, and that will also be a big change. Now, obviously, discovering intelligent life elsewhere in the universe would be a huge change.
Do you think they'll be multicellular?
Well, I think we'll discover microbes, and I don't know. That's I think without a doubt we'll discover microbes elsewhere, which will tell us at least that we're not unique in terms of life. This planet isn't the only planet harboring life. I don't. The likelihood of detecting intelligent life is much, much smaller, and I wouldn't give good odds on it in this century. But obviously it would change everything.
Would you vote for a rational AI president?
Would I vote? What?
Would you vote for a rational, artificial, intelligent president?
Yeah, absolutely. I vote for it. If it's a rational president, would be a good thing.
Just on that subject of the politics of AI, I mean, we've had experience now of the world's greatest government throwing a tremendous hissy fit at the moment and just about shooting itself in the foot, and which is a real shame. Particularly, the Republican Party used to be a pretty good party in some ways. Now,
really, and not since I've been alive. Okay.
Anyway, but the thing is, the Chinese government now is run by technocrats. Okay, virtually every single person in the whole of Europe is an engineer. Yeah. They don't allow financiers anywhere near the government, as far as I'm aware. In fact, they tend to shoot them.
What about lawyers? Anyway, circle on.
Yeah, come on. They may shoot them too. But this is a government which is showing considerable maturity across a range of issues, which everyone's aware of. And so, is that going to be the future of AI which will be strange because everyone thinks that science and technology progresses under a free government, but not necessarily. Prussia was not a free government, and science went forward under that.
under Kaiser, who did a pretty good job, really, in Bismarck. So will that be the case, or will that be the new Kaiser of the 21st century, the Chinese polity bureau? And is that a good thing?
I don't know. I like to think that science is a democratizing force, and I like to think that there's some possibilities that China will. Well, the one thing, I have we in the United States we get a lot of Chinese students who are very good at doing exams, but what they do have is far too much respect for their professors, and authority. And authority is, of course, anathema to science. There's no such thing as scientific authority. So you have to get rid of that mentality, and that mentality sometimes feeds down. It's very difficult to lose respect for authority in one area and on others. On the other hand, China is extremely good at enforcing authority, and I happen to think you're quite likely right in the sense, if I look around, the country that I expect will be dominant in much of the 21st century will be China. The United States, if it doesn't take the world with it, will decline, and China will become the dominant intellectual force.
Specifically in AI and areas of emerging revolutionary technologies that we're interested in. We don't know if it's interested in.
I mean, I've been supervising AI students in a lab in China together with Hugo, who's up there. And I think that right now, the state of AI research in China is way, way behind the US and Europe. And I think that if the most likely path to China catching up is by increased interaction with the West, and by, as examples, myself and Hugo working in China, myself part-time so far, him full-time.
They're kind of catching up with economics, aren't they?
As well, but in that case also through increased international cooperation, rather than through kind of siloing themselves off. So I kind of agree. He made the statement, science is a democratizing force. I think it's also an internationalizing force.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even if a lot of breakthroughs do take place in China, I don't think they're going to take place in some secret lab buried a mile under Beijing. They're going to take place in China with Western researchers flying back and forth, and a lot of international interaction. And that's what you see happening now. The best Chinese universities are also the ones that have the most interaction with the West, which is not to say that their ideas are all coming from the West. It's just that scientific advancement comes along with reaching out to wherever you can go to get more knowledge and more creativity. So
I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, I think it's, science doesn't function in secret. It can't, and it has to. Scientific ideas have to be shared and traded, and progress to happen. So you're absolutely right.
Yep.
So my question to a different tack. So there's been a mention now, it's a mention earlier on the weekend about quantum computing, and we're interested to get some views on what that means and when the expectation is that it will have some impact.
So I've got a prediction, which is I think we're going to find that quantum computing doesn't work the way people are envisioning. I think it's going to be a great tool for helping us refine our models of quantum mechanics, and that we'll discover that particularly many particle wave functions don't work quite the way we envision them. But I think it'll be great. We'll learn a lot, but I don't expect them to produce computational power to the degree that people are hoping.
I'm not sure. I would agree to some extent with what you say. I'm very skeptical of the hype associated with quantum computing. It's a fascinating idea, and I suspect there'll be test cases. But it's very difficult to make quantum computers. It's just a fundamental law of physics, and that doesn't mean it's impossible. I think they might impact on computing, but it's really an open question right now whether they're viable. I just don't think we know the answer to whether we can make viable quantum computers that do more than just give test examples of the fact that qubits are qubits. I think it's an open question. It could happen, but you'd have to look for different systems, and topological systems are one interesting example that might enforce quantum coherence long enough to do something with. But I think it's a fascinating area. I have an open mind.
I think it's going to start. It's going to start with probably specialized quantum computers good at solving certain kinds of problems rather than general reprogrammable, general quantum Turing machines. And exactly what those first specialized applications will be, I couldn't say right now. I mean, there's very few, even theoretically known quantum algorithms. So one of my conjectures has been that eventually someone will make an AI whose sensors and actuators are much closer to the quantum level than ours are, and that AI may be able to figure out more about quantum mechanics and more about quantum computing than we can, because the whole quantum domain is very unnatural to our brains. But an AI with different sensors and actuators could maybe manipulate things at the quantum level the same way we build stuff with blocks. So in that sense, advances in AI could drive quantum computing in interesting directions, but I don't know exactly what directions those would be.
Well, I'd take it a step further and say that we don't know if computers will do physics the same way we do when they're AI.
No,
and so it might be fascinating. We may just learn a lot of physics because because precisely the perception of the universe would be very different, and it's hard to know whether the physics that comes out of it would be the same or drive us in new directions. But part of what we're doing is sort of being one step removed from what you just said. We as you pointed out, we may learn about quantum mechanics by building quantum computers or AI machines that can test directly quantum mechanics at a scale we can't. Now, whether you say they learn about quantum mechanics or we learn about it through them, and not so clear, but the effect is the same.
So does that mean that Moore's law is coming to a close?
Was that?
Moore's law.
I'm going to talk about Moore's law and later and give a very pessimistic view.
Tristan.
You mentioned the energy crisis before. How do you think that's going to impact, say, the singularity happening at 2045 or the growth of exponential computing power if that all goes to shit?
Well, again, I'll start because I have the least to say and they much know much more. But what is clear to me, and anyone who's thought about this, is that the brain works very differently than computers do. And in the sense that if you wanted to have, if you can normalize how the brain works and what its computing power is or what its storage is, and you get in lots of different ways. But what's clear is that if you had a computing machine that had any of those characteristics, it would require huge amounts of energy. But the brain uses 20 watts of energy. And so there's something different about the way we compute than standard computing machines because they just take a lot more energy. Even my Mac takes more than 20 watts, and it's smarter than a Dell or something, but it's not as smart, I think, as me yet. And so there's something different. But until we do that, you're absolutely right. I think you're already seeing my friends at Google and other places that are buying up power because they desperately need it. Do you have any?
Tim?
Well, there are theoretical models of computation, reversible computation, which can actually reduce the energy dissipation to a very small amount. They have some impact on present-day systems, but I think as systems get bigger, I think power becomes one of the dominant. Both dissipating the heat and getting the power into them becomes very important. And so I expect that the computer manufacturers and the chip manufacturers will start. I mean, I think you already see Intel focusing a lot on power consumption. And so as we get really big machines, I think that's going to become a dominant feature of them.
But I don't think that's going to be a showstopper for AI, because I think AGI is primarily a software problem of knowing what program to write, and it's not going to ultimately require humongous computers using that much power that it would be infeasible to build them.
Tim?
Yeah, there's sort of three dimensions of the singularity: the nanotechnology, the biology, life extension, and AGI. I have a feeling
that's four.
Sorry, small numbers.
Those two, yeah. I have a fairly good sense of how hard it is going to be to build AGI, I think. But the other two dimensions, I don't have much of a sense of how hard those things are going to be. Nanotechnology, building things with atom by atom, etc. And my daughter works in molecular biology, so she made the comment to me that I think Ben gets the idea how hard the biology side of it. She made the comment that you computer guys have sort of no idea how hard biology and molecular biology is. So I'd just like some comments on those other two dimensions, singularity and how hard they're going to be to get.
Well, biology is hard. On the other hand, I notice going to AI conferences year after year, things progress little by little. Going to biology conferences, there's revolutionary new advances each year. So hard as it is, we seem to be progressing with solving the problems. And it seems to be driven by advances in measurement instrumentation, largely. Like you get a new machine, like a microarray or low-cost gene sequence or fMRI or optical brain imaging, then with all the data from that machine, people go to town analyzing it and then generate new theories. So as long as a new measurement technology keeps getting invented, which is not entirely by biologists, so that's quite cross-disciplinary, I think biology can keep advancing. So it's largely at the service of and it's largely driven by engineering progress. I think it's a very hard problem, and as I discussed in my talk just now, I think ultimately we're going to need more and more advanced AI to make sense of all that data. But in a sense, still, it's fundamentally easier than the other two things you mentioned, because we're trying to understand. For now, we're mostly trying to understand existing systems and measure them better and model them better, and that's different than trying to build something new. Now, synthetic biology gets into trying to build biological systems, but again, that's progressing pretty damn fast since we got the technology to do it. So I mean, I'm pretty optimistic that biology is going to keep racing forward. About nanotech, of course, what you had there is sort of like what happened with AGI and narrow AI, where the field started out with Eric Drexler being very ambitious, wanting to build molecular assemblers and so forth with the general purpose capability, and then what's now called nanotech is much more specialized with the different nano fabrics and special materials and so on, which is really good and useful research. But there's not that much effort going into Drexlerian nanotech. But then see what you have is stuff like DNA origami, which is coming at nanotech from more of a synthetic biology type direction. And I think that may be the path by which you get some kind of nanotech, like Drexler was looking for. So, because biotech is a special kind of nanotech, right? So maybe by studying that, we learn more how to do nanotech. And that seems, to me right now, the route that seems to have a rapid growth path, whereas more mechanical engineering inspired nanotech is kind of not exactly stalled out. I mean, Zybex is doing stuff, but it's not going forward as quickly.
There's a UK project which has got about $3 million currently underway.
On what?
On nanofabrication and assemblers. It's the very first one that got funding. I think Aaron's got the information on it.
Oh, cool.
I think nanotech is one of these areas where what's your estimation of the success rate will make a huge difference in the amount of money going into it. I've been going to nanotech conferences maybe for 15 years, and it's one of those things that just feels like, oh, there are these great ideas, and it's just not happening. For the last few years I've been, there have been remarkable things, like the DNA origami is really stunning, making very complex geometric shapes out of DNA, giving components that can be used to sort of start building a toolkit at that scale. There's a very nice nanotech roadmap that was put out a few years ago, which analyzed several different pathways, and going through DNA was one of them. Scanning tunneling electron microscopes is another. And once those start reaching some critical mass, I think you're going to see massive investment in that area because the potential economic payoffs are so huge. And so I think it's one of those things that it's sort of, until people really believe it, things are kind of slow and not much happens. Once something starts happening, we're going to see rapid explosion.
You go.
I don't think out there, the planet network, hyper-intelligence is around anything.
Well, they may be inside our molecules, encoded in a manner we can't understand. How could we know?
Well, I'll talk about it. I doubt it. I do think intelligence exists it's likely that intelligence exists elsewhere in the universe. It's likely that it has existed, in my mind. But existing for billions of years is not obvious to me that intelligence can do that. So, but if it is, I think the greatest likelihood, which solves something called the Fermi paradox, which is if it's out there, how come it hasn't contacted us, more or less? Because you can work out the time to go across the galaxy if you really wanted to, and populate the galaxy. It's short compared to the age of the galaxy. And Fermi said, why aren't they done that? And I think the reasonable answer is that after a certain stage of development, if you really achieved it, you wouldn't have any interest in anything else. There's nothing to learn from us, or nothing to learn from making contact with anything else. The best thing, safest thing to do, best thing to do is stay put and just keep quiet.
Do you think a previous intelligence in this universe or the next has been through a singularity before, and did they survive?
Possibly.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so you were talking about measuring technologies before. Do you think the technologies that we've got today has helped us improve making predictions about the future? And what is it about our predictions about the future which has improved, and what hasn't?
Well, computers have certainly allowed us to make better predictions than before we had computer technology, through just prevalence of statistical analysis methods and the ability to build simulation models and so forth. Yeah, it's certainly made it much better. I mean, it's also made it easier for careless people to quickly spew out a lot of bad predictions. But that's certainly been the main technology that's advanced prediction.
One interesting technology that's just kind of in its nascent phase are prediction markets, where people actually put money on their predictions.
Yeah.
And some of them are very, very accurate. I think we'll see progression in that area.
Which is also computer mediated.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Ben, like yesterday I heard you talking about your dog not fetching the stick when you were talking about your AI. It's more of a personal question. So obviously you guys have experience interacting with artificial intelligence, which is your own creation. Have you ever felt that you have actually built some kind of emotional attachment to your creations? And what do you think would be the likely kind of emotions that people might feel if they have all these robots walking around in their houses, cleaning their house, doing things for them, looking after them? Like, do you think we would build like intimate emotional relationship with these things? Or
I think I've developed emotional attachments to software bugs and ugly user interfaces where I miss them when we replace them with better ones. And if we get rid of a bug that was making the thing reason stupidly, I missed it when it started being rational again. Yeah, but I mean, right now that's not so different from the attachment that you could have to a favorite shirt or something when you come down to it. I think, to me, the AI agents that we had so far are not somehow interactive or sophisticated enough to evoke the emotional attachment I'd have to a pet or a person. But I do think that will come. And one woman I know in California, so you may remember an old version of Microsoft Word. Instead of that ugly little clippy paper clip, it had a little doggy there, right? And she would keep Word minimized in the corner, even when she wasn't using it, just because she liked having that little doggy on the screen of the computer. It was like her little friend, that clippy dog that kept her company. And that was a really stupid thing. You'd click on it and give you a help message in a bubble. But that showed me how little it takes to make some human beings feel an emotional attachment to an artificial agent. Basically, it was cute and furry and on her desk and kept her company. So I don't think it would take much to get an AI that people would be really, really emotionally attached to. And I mean, I hope to experiment with this in a few years using AI in computer games to make characters that people really feel something toward. But I'm the programmer, of course, may be the hardest case, though, because if you have programmed the thing, you're kind of aware of the fact that in some sense, a mechanical creation at the early stages, and you're less likely to react to it as if it were some autonomous being. So when the system acts spontaneously, surprisingly, and interestingly enough, that the programmer is kind of shocked and amazed by what it's doing and develops a special emotional attachment to that. I mean, then you're kind of there. You know, you're way along the path to human level AI, and we're not there yet.
One more little piece of evidence along that line is the Roomba. I was just reading a story. The Roomba is this little disc that kind of goes around and kind of vacuums your place.
You fell in love with your Roomba?
I don't have one, but
I do, and I fell in love with mine.
Apparently, all over Silicon Valley, when this thing came out, people who had never vacuumed their own house bought them, and they, gave them names. And when they go on trips to like hotel rooms, they bring their Roomba along with them.
And if the Roomba breaks, I heard this story. Someone's Roomba broke, and they sent it back to get repaired. But then they sent another one back. Like, this isn't mine. Send me another one. I wanted my Roomba back. That is the other Roomba.
Mine did break, and it yeah. But I was worried that you sent me a worse one. I didn't really care.
All right. You didn't care.
In the corners when it's circular.
It does that's a good question, but it does a good job. I don't know. It's got a little swingy thing.
Talking about fembots.
Well, I mean, people can become emotionally attached to inflatable sex dolls. So. Which movie? Yeah, I did actually. Yeah, those exist, and once they get better and cheaper, there'll probably be a very big market for them. We'll have one here next year at the next Australia Singularity Summit.
Then we'll get lots of people coming on.
Yeah, that could be the inflatable keynote speaker.
Cheaper.
The after 2 years for robotics as a Japanese engineer. There's a very deep relationship with an advanced robot. It'd probably be the movie. It's definitely important.
It's a form of wireheading, I would say. Not necessarily a positive development.
So you think we would have repercussions on the human race that they would have more relationships with robots rather than humans?
Yeah, what if your robot partner is more satisfying to you than any human partner? What's going to happen to human relationships?
Well, I'll be happy because
it's already happened. No, but that's already happened. It's not a robot partner, but there are generations of kids who are much more comfortable in front of their computers than with other humans.
Well, but they're mostly chatting with their friends.
But they can't chat. They don't chat directly. You're given the option of talking directly or communicating by chat. They'll communicate by chat to someone across.
Because you can chat with 5 people at once more easily than you can talk to 5 people at once. Yeah.
In terms of how far you guys looking at like 20 years, obviously it's quite hard, 30 years to look out. Is there a kind of an area where it stops being fuzzy? Is it like 5 years or 7 years? Is it like a roadmap you can build today that says, I know whereabouts will be in 5 years. I know what I think we can predict. Is there that kind of area, or is it kind of tomorrow is fuzzy for the next 20, 30 years?
I think for a very specific technology or project, of course you can predict a few years out. Like there's no way OpenCog is going to give you a superhuman AI in the next 2 or 3 years. And you can say that. It would say fMRI technology, you can guess how far that's going to go in the next few years. But if you're looking across the whole human race, across all possible inventions and technologies that any random guy in his basement in Uzbekistan might be cooking up, that becomes harder because as someone said earlier today in their talk, some unlikely thing is almost certain to happen, right? And we just don't know what that is. So it's difficult to be certain when the world is so big with so many people around doing different things.
And what technologies catch on and actually cause big social events? Twitter. Why is having a short, limited message, a great thing? I would never have predicted that. And yet Twitter has caused massive political change in the world. Many people are crediting it with part of what's going on in the Middle East right now.
I think
dramatic.
you obviously, the closer you are to the time of prediction, the more accurate you are. But I do think it's even 5 years. It's very difficult to predict what major changes are going to take place. And when I write a grant proposal, which is usually a 3-year proposal in physics, I point out even then that it's not clear to me that I'll actually be working on the things I say I'll be working on in 3 years. So if something else comes up that's more interesting.
No, it's a big problem for PhD students. Now, I've had that happen many times. A PhD student starts one thing, and 2 years into their PhD, the world has changed. There's a new kind of tool or something, and what they have to completely rethink what they were doing in the middle. And that didn't happen so much in the 80s when I was doing my PhD. I mean, that's the consequence of accelerating change.
So even specifically in your own individual fields, that's quite hard to do even a couple of years out now. Is that due to that exponential growth in your specific fields, or how has that
probably.
changed?
Well, I think it's probably not true in refrigerator engineering or T-shirt
But
design.
even then, the point is, the key developments are the unexpected ones. That's what I keep pointing out. In my own field, sure. You're building a satellite, and and if the James Webb Space Telescope, for example, if it were built by the United States, it probably won't happen. We know when it's going to launch. We know more or less the kind of things it's going to do, so we can make predictions about or any satellite. But it's the unexpected things that make the really dramatic changes, and obviously the unexpected is unpredictable by definition.
What sort of developments in physics do you think will be having the biggest impact, specifically physics, over the next 10 to 50 years?
Well, so you mentioned, quantum computing may be one, but I would say that the borders between physics and biology are disappearing, or have disappeared. And so biological system, when I was doing my PhD at MIT many years ago, I became depressed, which is the norm. And and I thought of while maybe doing a PhD MD, and I talked to the head of the cell biology department at Harvard, who was a friend, and he said, I decided to do biophysics for my PhD. He said, don't do biophysics, because biophysics isn't of interest to physicists, and it isn't of interest to biologists either. But that was a long time ago, and it's completely changed. Biological systems are interesting systems for physicists to explore. They are new examples of physical systems, and moreover, the questions that physicists are asking, such as protein folding and things, are the very questions that are of interest to biologists. So I think the biggest development may be the merging, if you wish, between physics and biology.
Yeah, what I'm looking forward to in the next century is to go beyond nanotech to femtotech, as Hugo and I have discussed, which may or may not be possible, but is in principle permitted by current theories of physics that would allow various kinds of so-called degenerate matter, where you're just assembling things from nuclear particles without needing the atoms in there. So if we could figure out how to do that,
good luck.
If you yeah, well,
you can do it in a neutron star, but weighs 100 billion tons per teaspoon.
Or you could do it in a quark gluon plasma at like 4 billion degrees or something.
If you had a machine that cost. Anyway.
No, we're talking about huge revolutions. Look in the next century. If that happens, that'll go way beyond nanotech and maybe very, very interesting.
Right, it would be fascinating.
If you talk about potentially fully harnessing the computational power in a given hunk of matter, which even nanotech doesn't come close to doing because of its restriction to dealing with molecules.
I love these quotes from famous physicists in 1890 saying, all the laws of physics have been discovered, all that's left is to refine the constants, that kind of thing, right before special relativity, general relativity, quantum mechanics. And just over the past 15 years, dark matter, neutrinos having a mass. It's like, I have a PhD in physics. I haven't been working in that area, but I read the news and it's like, my God, these fundamental, amazing discoveries happening in cosmology and the interaction with particle physics. It's just remarkable, the things that are happening there.
Can I just a quick question, particularly to Lawrence?
Yeah, Lawrence, my name.
Because I think you've got a big knowledge of string theory. Is that correct? Or some sort of knowledge.
Well, maybe more than other people. Some people.
Well, it's actually a prediction made by a notorious science journalist. I'm sure you've heard of him, John Horgan.
Yeah. John Horgan's just full of
Okay,
shit.
I agree. I agree, right? But he said
Sorry, John, if you're listening to this.
he made the prediction of the end of science, which many people
we
heard.
wanted to sell books.
Sure, and
Okay.
great. The end of always sells books.
Yeah.
But some of his skepticism about scientific hype has been justified in terms of string theory.
Oh, skepticism, scientific hype, I'm all in favor of it. I mean, there should be. You get excited what you're working on. Look. Here's the way it works. You can't work on something for 20 years unless you're excited about it, unless you think it has a hope. But the great thing about science is when the minute you find out it doesn't, you give up and you go something else. I mean, that's what's great about science. You don't hold on to 2,000-year-old, fairy tales. But at the same time, you've got to be excited about it. So that kind of hype, the fact that you think it has potential, is necessary when you're working on something to motivate yourself. But it is incredibly inappropriate and dangerous for science to hype things because it comes back and bites you in the butt. Because the public sees that that isn't being met, and that's one of my reasons I've written about string theory in some sense negatively, because the hype certainly was not justified. The potential was there, but the fact that we were coming with theory of everything in 1984 was just obviously not the case, and those people who were talking about it, most of them know better now, it was again, a friend of mine who's a Nobel laureate in physics would say string theory has been promising and promising and promising and promising.
Well, I mean, the line from biotech is biotech's going to be the way of the future and has been for the last 50 years.
And nanotechnology, I mean, it's been ever since, I've been, nanotechnology.
Okay, Morgan has written another book, a criticism of singularity. Is singularity going to suffer the same deflation as biotech, nanotech?
Well, I'm highly skeptical of this singularity word, so I came anyway. But
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Discrimination. I lose $40, but I not lose my patient. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, we'll see you again.
Ignorance.
Okay.
Thank you. All the best, Professor.
Yeah, we'll see you again. He was asking a question, I guess.
I just want to see these guys suffer the same, or get organised, get an organised hatchet job done.
Well, I mean, look, the good thing about a prediction like Singularity 2045 and 2046, when it hasn't happened, then I suppose it tells you something.
Okay, I don't think we've got time for any more questions on this panel.
I was enjoying this.
Well,
I wasn't talking.
Can we have one more question? Do you reckon we can fit one more in?
It's only a really good one, though.
Okay, only if it's really good. It's not actually a comment or a debate. Okay, over there. Whoever was. Yep.
Yeah, young guy. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just wondering about, given the huge potentiality of artificial general intelligence and similar technologies, why there hasn't been more interest in investing in these things from maybe governments or other corporations. Is it perhaps to do with previous hype that hasn't turned out, or maybe short-term thinking, or I don't know, some other reason?
Why there isn't investment? I think there must be incredible investment.
More investment, given the huge potential there is.
You probably can.
I mean, there was a ton of hype in the 80s that didn't pan out, and there were, the cover of Business Week was AI, the Emperor Has No Clothes. And there was something they called the AI winter at that time. And it's sort of slowly been climbing back since then, and I think, people have been toning down the rhetoric. So
I think one general observation I've made before is, there's an old saying that old scientists never change their mind. They just get old and die, and then the young ones come in with new ideas. But now, due to exponential acceleration, for the first time, there's like multiple revolutions in an area within one scientist's career. So we're not dying fast enough. The old scientists still stay around and are controlling money, resources, and research directions when there's been so many revolutions since they got their PhD. And you see this not in every field, but I see this in AI. There's certainly an old guard in American AI who's been pursuing the same ideas the same people since the 1980s who are getting most of the research money. And this is a significant issue in that field. In biology, it's happened less so because it's empirical data analysis focused, and you get feedback on your ideas. So what he said in science, when you're shown to be wrong, you move on to the next thing. And in biology, that's happened pretty clearly because it's data analysis based. In AI, because it's sort of a mix of an engineering discipline and a science, people's wrong ideas do not get refuted as quickly. So part of the answer is that to the extent AI is funded, the funding goes into a handful of largely obsolete AI paradigms. And I think part of the answer is an increasingly short-term nature of research funding, which is a problem that China doesn't have now as much as the US, where businesses in the US are after quarterly profits. VCs are after companies that will show a very profitable exit in 3 to 5 years. DARPA, which has been historically the largest funder of AI in the world, has shifted their strategy to funding things that can rapidly move into military deployment and away from blue sky research funding, such as led to the internet and other things like that. So in the US, there's been more tendency toward focus on the shorter term. And China is focusing on the longer term in research strategy as well as other areas, partly because it's their culture, and partly because they know they're behind and they have to take some chances to catch up. And that is one of the things I think China has going for it and the US has going against it, although that could easily reverse if the US altered its funding strategies.
Senator John McCain, before he was a presidential candidate, I've researched this, personally killed the initial idea of funding assemblers to the tune of $6 million after he was lobbied by materials nanotech people and described it as a waste of money because it was science fiction. So this is the preliminary research. Now the UK group is funding it for $3 million. I think it's the University of Manchester, I can't remember exactly, but I've got the details. So that's an example of politics stopping even the idea of looking at it.
But I would say as frustrating as the lack of funding for AGI is personally to those of us in the field, I think in the big picture of human history, it's just like a tiny little glitch because, we are working on AGI. Narrow AI is pushing us toward AGI. And, the difficulties with the funding mechanisms, if you take a Kurzweilian view, they can hold back the singularity by 10 or 15 years. They're not going to hold it back by centuries.
Great.